A reading from Isaiah. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, who brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, your sentinels lift up their voices together. They sing for joy. For in plain sight they see the return of the Lord to Zion. Break forth together into singing, you ruins of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations. And all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from Hebrews. Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets. But in these days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also created the worlds. He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being. And he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited, and more excellent than theirs. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Please stand for the reading of the gospel. The Holy Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh, and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. At precisely 9:33 a.m. on Friday, December 27th, I received a text from my sister who stated, I just saw the first Christmas tree out on the curb. My response was, say it isn't so. It's only the third day of Christmas. But it was true. It was another example of how we don't understand the depth of the actual meaning behind some of the holidays we observe. Today is the 5th day of Christmas. Christians celebrate the feast of the Nativity, the Word made flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. We heard that from our gospel reading this morning. This is John's nativity story. Without angels or shepherds, no manger, or a pregnant teenager, John tells us about the incarnation. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what it was his own, and his own people did not accept him. The truth is, little has changed. The Word made flesh, Jesus the Christ, God incarnate, is still not known or accepted by his own. Perhaps a story can help make the connection. It is a story that celebrates the most beautiful thing in creation as that which has given all. That which has given all. The story is about a tree, just a tree. But it might just as well be about our Lord, the most beautiful one, the eternal one, who has given all for our sake. So the sides of the path were covered with piles of white snow, but in the center, its whiteness was crushed and churned into a messy brown by the trampling of hundreds of hurrying feet. It was the day before Christmas, and the people rushed up and down the path carrying armloads of bundles. They laughed and they called to each other as they pushed their way through the crowds. Above the path, the long arms of an ancient tree reached toward the sky. It swayed and moaned as a strong wind grasped its branches and bent them down toward the earth. Down below, a haughty laugh sounded, and a lovely young fir tree stretched and preened its thick green branches, sending a fine spray of snow simmering down to the ground. "I should think," said the fir in a high, smug voice, "that you'd try a little harder to stand still. Goodness knows you're ugly enough with the leaves you've already lost. If you move around any more, you'll be quite bare." "I know," answered the old tree. "Everything has put on its most beautiful clothes for the celebration of the birth of Christ. Even from here, I can see the decorations shining from each street corner. And yesterday, some men came and they put the brightest, loveliest lights on every tree along the path. Except on me, of course." He sighed softly, and a flake of snow melted in the form of a teardrop, and it ran down the gnarled trunk. "Oh, indeed, and did you expect they'd put lights upon you so that your ugliness would stand out even more?" smirked the fir. "I guess you're right," replied the old tree in a sad voice. "If there were only some place I could hide until after the celebrations are over. But here I stand, the only ugly thing among all this beauty. If they would only come and chop me down." He sighed sorrowfully. "Well, I don't wish you any ill," replied the fir, "but you are an eyesore. Perhaps it would be better if they just came and chopped you down. In the meantime, the least you could do would be to try to hang on to those last 3 small leaves you have. At least you wouldn't be completely bare." "Oh, I've tried so hard," cried the old tree, "and each fall I say to myself, this year I won't give up a single leaf, no matter the cost. But someone always comes along who seems to need them more than I. I told you not to give them away to that dirty little paper boy, but you didn't listen." The paper boy came for leaves each year to make his poor old grandmother a collage with bright colored leaves, and it made her so happy. And there were others who needed them as well for parties and projects or just to frolic in with their friends. Suddenly, a cold wind blew down the path, and a tiny brown bird fell to the ground at the foot of the old tree and lay there shivering, too cold to lift its wings. The old tree looked down in pity, and then he quickly let go of his last 3 leaves. The golden leaves fluttered down and settled softly over the shimmering, shivering little bird, and it lay there quietly under the warmth of the leaves. "Now you've done it," shrieked the fir. "You've given away every single leaf. Christmas morning, you'll make our path the ugliest sight in the whole city." The old tree said nothing. Instead, he stretched out his branches to gather what snowflakes he could, that they might not fall on the tiny bird. The young fir turned away in anger, and it was then that he noticed a painter sitting quietly a few feet from the path, his focus intent on the canvas. The man's clothes were worn and tattered, and his face wore a sad expression. He was thinking of his loved ones and the empty, cheerless Christmas morning they would face because he had not sold a single painting in the last several months. But the young fir did not see this. Instead, he turned back to the old tree and said in a haughty voice, "At least keep your bare branches as far away as possible. I'm being painted, and your hideousness will mar the background." "I'll try," the old tree replied, and he raised his branches as high as possible. Christmas morning, the young fir was tired and stiff from posing for the painter. It made him grumble, too. Suddenly, he saw a huge crowd of people surrounding the old tree, oohing and eyeing as they stood back and gazed upward. Even those hurrying along the path had to stop for a moment and look before they went on. Whatever could it be, thought the haughty fir, and he too looked up to see if perhaps the top of the old tree had broken off during the night. Just then, a newspaper blew away from the hands of an enraptured newsboy and sailed straight into the young fir. The fir gasped in amazement, for there on the front page was a picture of the painter holding his painting of a great white ancient tree whose leafless branches, laden with snow, stretched upward into the sky, while down below lay a tiny brown bird almost entirely covered by 3 golden leaves. And beneath the picture were the words, "The most beautiful thing is that which has given all." That which has given all. The young fir quietly bowed its head beneath the great beauty of the humble old tree. And so now we bow our heads in the presence of the one who has given all.